Yo, parish orphans and retrogrades. Yo, parish orphans and retrogrades. Happy Friday. As promised, I have a special episode of Rules for Retrogrades today. That episode involves faith, science, and philosophy as its topic. And it's a general heading, and we're going to be talking about several things. And I say we because I'm joined by my older brother, Dr. Gregory Gordon. Yes, there's another one, another Bobka. And it's exciting to have him with me. Greg, thanks for joining today to talk some science and religion.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for having me. Really glad to join the channel. I had to rep the Lakers hat. You know, your soon to be favorite team again. LeBron's going to be packing his bags. He'll be going. And so I wanted to bring that. You know, maybe I'll send you one as well to welcome you back to the fold, to the Laker fam very soon.
It's been 8 years of exile, man. And everyone, I mean, I think everyone who cares on this channel knows what a frosty 8 years it's been. I was watching Skip while I was doing some IRS tax documents earlier, and it's looking more and more certain he's going to be gone, because you're still in Southern California, where we grew up, where, you know, we grew up watching Magic Johnson Showtime Lakers, and it sounds like he's really going to be gone. Do you believe that's going to happen? Is that the scuttlebutt?
I think if I could wish it into reality, that would happen. But I don't know. Maybe you're more up on the scuttlebutt than I am. But it seems like that's a legit thing that could happen. I mean, it would free up a ton of salary cap space, right? So they could bring in someone else. I don't know, a big man. I don't know if Giannis is gonna go to them or whatever. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
He's made. You know how much he's made? He's made $347 million in 8 years. 347 million. And he's old, and he's not as good as they say anymore. And yeah, evidently a story broke. Whitlock was, and people are like, we don't care what you're talking about. But Jason Whitlock was covering it. I guess LeBron said last night that the Lakers GM did him dirty. Anytime he doesn't win, someone did him dirty. So I am hoping that I will wear a Lakers hat once he leaves, as long as JJ Redick is gone too. So the like.
Oh, it's got to be both of them.
I think so.
But Bronny's fine, right? Bronny can stay. Poor kid. You're okay with Bronny?
He'll be gone though. But yeah, I mean, everyone knows he'll be gone when LeBron is gone. But I don't mind him. I do feel bad for him, actually.
Yeah. We wish him the best. LeBron though, we're gonna pack his bags for him. He can go. It's time. Go back to Cleveland, maybe.
This is a place of welcoming, and you can just get the hell out of here.
I mean, I'll put it this way: for anyone that cares even marginally, which is a comfortable 12 to 16% maybe of this audience, it's been 8 years with all failures, one Mickey Mouse bubble ring for the Lakers, and lots of tantrums and lots of blaming others, and it's just been rough. It's been rough because as a Southern California native who grew up liking Magic Johnson, Greg, you probably still know my pin code. I'm always tempted to say it because I'm like, it's Laker themed.
Don't
do
that. Yeah.
No, not a good idea. Okay.
I'm not even gonna try to guess. I'm not even gonna put out a humorous guess, because I'll probably get it right within 3 guesses. So yeah, I won't even. I'm not gonna put it out.
I thought you knew it. Dave actually knows it, and he'll go. It's a little joke from Starsky and Hutch, the remake. There's like 2 dragons. I'll tell you afterwards. I thought you might have known. 2 dragons.
It isn't Bosco, is it?
I just watched that episode last night. No, yeah, it's not any kind of good gag. It's a cool thing to bring your smarty pants science PhD brother on, particularly because I do like to talk science and philosophy. It's not a good like gag on YouTube or social media, publicity stunt, whatever, to just for clicks to bring to share your pin code with everyone. And I'm not going to do that. But I don't know. I thought we could talk about you have a book in the offing, and it's Fides broadly speaking, a Fides et Ratio thing. And because you're a PhD scientician, you have a PhD from Colorado School of Mines in the hard sciences, specifically geology. I thought it would be cool to talk to you about some of the like thought trends that I've noted these 8 years now on media doing this. At the end of the summer, it'll be 8 years. Started at the end of the summer 2018, making 3 videos a week. And what I was telling you last night or a little bit earlier today was I've been surprised how much the trad-calf set that I guess I'm broadly enough speaking a part of has been swept up in the fundy Calvinist sort of fear of science. So I just thought you're a good guy to bring on, and I didn't know until a couple months ago that you had a book in the offing. So broadly speaking, did you want to comment on that? I like going specifics first and then backing it out, but I mean let's violate that one.
Yeah, no, totally. Thanks for having me again, Tim, and Steph behind the scenes there. So this has been an interest of mine. I mean, we've been talking about it for 20 years off and on. And so what's this? This is, as someone who has an undergrad and a master's and PhD in science, and that's not to toot my own horn. Actually, I'm very, very aware of the limitations of science and the limitations, mentally speaking and emotionally sometimes, of my fellow scientists, broadly speaking. So I am an applied scientist, very much. So working in the energy industry, working as a geologist, I'm very much in the practical aspect of the sciences, right? Theoretical can be interesting and important as well. But so I've been in sciences for 25 years. As I mentioned, we've been talking about it for 20 years or so. And I'm finally starting to get to the ideation phase of a book that is really going to be focused on not really the history of science. I mean, it has to be a little bit of a survey of the history of the ideas that led to Western science, but also where did science go so wrong? I mean, I don't only want to like catalog all of the failures of science. We can get into eugenics. We can get into all like the horrors of scientific murders, abortion, eugenics, all that throughout the years. But philosophically as well, where did science go wrong? And that's where we could talk about scientism and positivism, the limitations of human knowledge, or I shouldn't really say limitations on human knowledge, but it's a limitation of scientific understanding epistemologically, or now you're the philosopher, but for everyone in your audience, how do we know what we know? How do we gather knowledge as humans? What is the full range of human knowledge and experience? And how do we bring knowledge into our minds? The difference between the mind and the brain. Very broadly speaking, I've been interested in a lot of these topics. And then with the failures of science, or science, whether you use that synonymously with Anthony Fauci or whatnot, but you look at COVID and you see how science, the science, how was that used? Look at the horrors that were done. Look at the tyranny that we just underwent just 5-6 years ago in the name of so-called vaccines. There are many religious overlays with the pursuit or the perception of science. And so I know that's a lot. I've thrown in a lot of broad ideas there, but science versus scientism has always been a real interest of mine. And I'm beginning to put those chapters together. I'm beginning to outline and form the ideas for this book, broadly speaking. I've written a little bit about it over the years, a little bit for my own devices, a little bit for various websites, Mises.org. This is even something that's been brought into the realm of like Austrian economics, the realm of knowledge, the calculation problem. How do we know what we know? Positivism in economic sciences. It's very broad, but I think there's a lot of fertile ground there, because when you talk to scientific elites, and a lot of academics as well, you get this arrogance. You get this, it's almost like a know-nothing attitude, right? Think of a really, really smart, stupid person, or a stupid, smart person. Think of a Neil deGrasse Tyson. Just imagine that guy and the ick flowing out of him during an interview. He poo-poos everything, whether it's history, ethics, certainly religion and faith, right? Philosophy, that's all brushed aside with, one swipe of his hand, right? That level of arrogance is something that drives me up a wall. And I think that needs to be combated. That's what I'm going to be trying to do with this book project as I jump into it.
You're familiar, I think, because we've talked about it with the second or third most recent Ed Feser book, Aristotle's Revenge.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good one, written as a pretty sharp philosophical critique of scientism. What I'd like to see from you is sharp scientific critique of science. And I think that's what you're after. And it's interesting because we have went different paths in college, but we were both, it's funny because our educations are so similar. 2 years of Dallas Jesuit, which people have heard me at times, if you listen to the show religiously enough, complaining about the Dallas Jesuit education, but it wasn't altogether bad education. Then 2 years of, we went to Plano Senior High, and then 4 years undergrad at the University of Texas system in Dallas there, both scholarship guys. So it's fun. I was thinking about it for the purposes of this show, and it's like some of the real high points of education that began even in 9th and 10th grade at Dallas Jesuit, or what gave me lifelong interest, serious adult lifelong interest in the ideas of critiquing the Enlightenment, positivism, scientism. And I think you too, if you trace it back to, that's what I would get. I mean, even like Mrs. Felice's class in 10th grade, I started getting those interests there. I think it's the same for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Despite the Jesuit part of the education, I mean, some of the classes there were great. I mean, the English literature and whatnot. But beyond that, I mean, the science was like, meh, we're so much of the way that science is kind of broken up and taught as its own pursuit, not integrated with the other fundamental modes of thinking, the other fundamental subjects. So much of that, I think, really, it's strange, right? Because it puts like chemistry as its own pursuit that overlaps very little with physics, right? And then there's biology. And then there's even like geology and neuroscientists, people like me are like, ew, the historical or the applied scientist. Oh my gosh. But they're all kind of siloed, right, into their own bins or silos. And it's a strange way that the Western world in the past, 150, 200 years, maybe a little bit more, post Bacon and post many others. But it's a strange way that we've been put into these separate boxes where you can go through. Let me give you an example. Now, I went to a great, very applied school to get my PhD in graduate school, but I think this is true across the board because I know lots of different earth scientists, lots of scientists in general who went on to graduate school, got a PhD, right? To get a PhD, you need to be a natural philosopher. You need to understand, first of all, these different ways of thinking. How do we gather information? How do we synthesize information? You need to at least have, I think, one class in the philosophy of science or epistemology. Otherwise, you're just out there not learning how to think and how to analyze everything in the human experience of the natural world, but rather what it's turned into is, and people still think this, I mean, maybe even some folks in your audience, people think that, oh, you go and get a PhD, you must be really smart. Not necessarily. And two, that you have to go, you're basically going to become an expert. And that is the way that it's kind of gone. It's gone that direction. You become this really, really detailed expert on something where it's like, how does that help humanity? How is becoming an expert on the mating patterns of a yellow dung beetle, in Antarctica or whatever it is? What is the point of that? How do you integrate that with other knowledge? People think that getting the PhD just makes you an ultra specialist. And to some degree, that's very true. But is that really supposed to be how it was? And so there's a big critique of not only science, but science education to be had there. And I think that, again, to back up again, I think that to have a PhD or any kind of degree in natural sciences, I think you need to be leaning toward becoming a natural philosopher. You need to understand how we know what we know and why are we pursuing that. And you need to be able to ground your pursuit and the knowledge that you're gaining in a broader intellectual framework, rather than just studying the dung beetle for the dung beetle's sake.
Yeah, I think but what you're saying, everyone needs to have a grounding in natural philosophy if you're university educated, was considered first principle of getting a university education until the Enlightenment. And you mentioned the post-Bacon science world. And that doesn't mean science changed after we got that delicious breakfast food. You're talking about Francis Bacon and
It's
Rene
an extra $2 with bacon, but sorry.
Yeah, so you have these two rivals, allegedly. If you know the story of early modern philosophy, Francis Bacon's supposed to be an empiricist who hates the rationalists in this civil war of early modern epistemology.
Like Descartes, right?
Descartes, a rationalist. Bacon is an empiricist. They're supposed to hate each other, but they have the exact same critique of not knowledge, not just the study of knowledge, but the method by which knowledge is studied, aka the university. And they both said the exact same thing, even though they're supposedly rivals in terms of where they derive knowledge as empiricists and rationalists. They both say the university going forward needs to drop final causation and formal causation. And this is the basis of what we call scientific positivism. This is the basis of everything that I think you're going to be critiquing in this video today. And we're going to get to specific areas of science, but they both say this, and everyone left behind the most important two aspects of what scientists call causation. And before then, the university was committed to, the first thing you took was you were a natural philosopher. That's why it's called a PhD. Not everyone gets their doctorate in philosophy, but you still get a PhD in whatever you get a PhD in. Anything but theology is considered a philosophy doctorate. And that's because everything was supposed to be a study of one of the natural sciences. But here's the kicker. I don't know which of these things you know and which that you don't, but after the Enlightenment, when Francis Bacon is publishing something called the Novum Organum, he's saying we need to eliminate not just Aristotle's final and formal causation from the way that we study the sciences. We need to undo Aristotle as the fundamental figure in Western civilization's like life of the mind. And we need to do a new organon, which was one of Aristotle's books of biology. We need to fundamentally rethink Aristotle from the ground up. And the problem is, once we did that, Heidegger sort of repeats this critique in the early 20th century by saying Aristotle went wrong. He studied being, but actually he was studying beings. He thought he was studying this broad science of generic being, and we really need to study being qua being, which Aristotle said he studied all along. And the point of it is that science can no longer understand anything because it bracketed off like formal causation, which just means that being is intelligible, and final causation, which means the real reason we ask why, the answer to the question why. And so fast forward, I don't know, 100 years after Heidegger, and at Heidegger's time, they'd already been making this critique of modernity for 300 years. And you wind up as a Roman Catholic, like I was in 2018, thinking that everybody out there in the Catholic world shared our Catholic philosophy of nature, which we were never off board the four Aristotelian causes, which is why we think faith and reason go together nicely. And suddenly I'm shocked. I'm shocked that Catholics are out there saying, just because some of the sciences have been psyops, which I agree, a premise I affirm, that all of them are bad. And I'm like, this is not our philosophy. This is not our view of the world. This is not our philosophy of nature. So I think I wanted to start out with some specific talking points knowing that you and I are approaching, we have the same point of arrival, different points of departure. I wanted to talk.
Can I jump in really quick before you jump off there? I want to underscore what you're saying there. And correct me if I say anything wrong as a non-philosopher. I'm a philosophy enjoyer, but non-philosopher. So out of the 4 causes, which I'm sure you've talked about before with your audience, going back to certainly like thinking Thomas Aquinas, modern science is so denuded right now at the time. Modern science is okay with, your average egghead, dumb IQ 120, PhD in science, whether it's physics, chemistry, whatever. They're okay with material cause. That's okay. We'll do that, right? Maybe I'm thinking some of them are okay with thinking about things as a formal cause, right? Like, what is the essence of, well, probably not the essence of a thing, but what's its form? What's its pattern? Maybe. But when you get to efficient, who or what made it, they start getting really squishy. Like, what do you mean who? Once you start getting to questions of why, modern scientists are absolutely pathetic in my experience. And then, as you already mentioned, when you get to final cause, in other words, why was it made? Just a straight up pure why. What's the purpose? What's the goal? The telos? Forget about it. A lot of them sound like complete boobs or idiots. They think that that's baby talk. They're so inverted. They think that why would there be a point to anything? It's like, we just study it because it is. It's a brute fact of the universe. So we study it here, and we're going to tell you how it works, like a clockmaker or watchmaker. But the question of why, or is it all tied together in a purpose or telos, goal directedness? Please, we're scientists. It's weird. It's almost like a super dumb inversion principle that's at work in the modern sciences. So I just wanted to throw that in and tie it into what you're saying. I think I see it on the screen there. Yeah, out of the 4 causes, it's like modern science is denuded down to only paying attention to the material, I think.
Yeah, material and I was going to make a joke about Cornell West, black science. Or no, I call him Neil deGrasse Tyson. Me and Dr. Michael Robillard call Neil deGrasse Tyson black science man. Cornell West is black philosophy man. And I always get them mixed up in my head. So now I have them straight. And, God bless the two of them. But what I was going to say.
Cornell West seems like a really fun guy. Neil deGrasse Tyson seems like a total stiff. But anyway, keep going.
I think Cornell West is in one of the Matrix movies, pop philosopher that he be. But so it's material cause and efficient cause. And there's actually sort of 5 Aristotelian causes because God's the final efficient cause. But it's what they wanted to, when they say efficient cause and they left it intact, they literally mean the processes by which work is accomplished. So like,
fair enough.
I was talking to Steph's mom about this, I think a couple of days ago, the mother-in-law a couple of days ago. And I was like, well, just think for the 4 causes, since we're going to be coming back to this, think of a house, right? The night before, if assuming that houses were built this way, they're actually not, but you put all the raw materials near where you're going to build the house, like the night before. The material cause, what actually causes the house to be in the material sense, is each of those material, whatever it is, glass and brick and all the stuff. I really know embarrassing little about what the hell they're making.
We have the example of a table on the screen right now.
Oh, okay. The table,
so do you want?
I know more of the shit that goes into a table. I thought
if he started talking about Legos, we were going to have to push him right back on track. But
how about like a PSA basketball card? How about that?
No, I think like Tim Gordon thinks houses are made of just glass and brick. Sounds like a catastrophe given all the tornadoes we have. Okay, so let's do table, but that's better. So the materials are the material cause. So wood and like a metal legs. So if you're going to build a table tomorrow morning, that's the material cause for it. The formal cause, which is one of the 2 magic causes, the Aristotelian causes that they didn't like in modernity, is in the mind of the sculptor, whoever makes the table, or the mind of the master builder. Okay. It's the like Platonic form, the blueprint.
Platonic form,
yeah. What they're gonna make, or hylomorphic form in the Aristotelian mind. Yeah, the design in the mind. When it's imperfected before it's designate. And so the efficient cause in the strict sense is that process beginning the next day by which the builder or the architect starts taking that raw material, the material cause, accessing epistemically the formal cause and shaping it through whatever hammering, or again, this is embarrassingly paltry, my knowledge of how to make a table or a house, but you shape it with work into, the form that was in his mind.
Right.
And of course, the final cause is always, in the Aristotelian sense, it's something, the function of the thing as per good living. So a table is always there for eudaimonia, for human happiness, for good living in tabliness. A house is there for good moral living in terms of houseliness. And so there's this totality.
And a good table is that object which is good at being a table. It has a high degree of tabliness, right? In other words, it holds a plate of butter. It'll serve you dinner to do what it's meant to do what it's designed to do, right? Is that kind of the thinking?
Precisely. Yeah. And this is why it's so very important that for Catholics, we don't believe it affects everything. What is our view of the human person? Well, like, remember during the Transformers movement in 2014, 2015, Bruce Jenner, when Transformers was a big thing, they would say, you aren't your body. You are. They would take this Cartesian dualistic sense of like, really there are two yous. There's your body and there's your true soul, and that's you.
It's very Gnostic, right?
Super Gnostic. It is actually outright Gnosticism, because we would say no. Michael Knowles was good about popularizing this. You are your body, because you could tell about an ergon, which is the function something performs, or the eidos, the true intelligible quantitative essence of a thing, and its telos, its function, just by looking at its matter. So you are really who that person is inside, but we kind of believe in physiognomy as Catholics. Good people tend to smile a lot, that their faces don't get creased. So in other words, to keep this short, it's really, really important, because if you think about what it's not just modern science, but the modern academy did self-consciously. I can show you chapter and verse. Descartes writing this and Francis Bacon writing this, supposedly rivals, saying the modern university from all its disciplines needs to eradicate formal and final causation. This means all you're doing to explain a thing, anything, any effect in the world, you need all four causes. You need to be talking about what causes it materially, what causes it efficiently, what causes its intelligibility, its form, its ergon, its eidos, which is the invisible principle, which is why it got bracketed by Bacon and Descartes, and its final cause, which is always about what its real purpose was as co-created by human, artifact makers, or by the ultimate creator, God. And when you puzzle over something like cancer, why can't they solve cancer allegedly? Runaway cellular mitosis or something. That it's because they restricted themselves to just dealing in efficient and material causes. It's no surprise that if you can't ask the big why, formally, and you can't ask the double big why finally, then you're not going to be able to come to any good conclusions. And I'm just saying, I wanted to talk to you today is that a lot of trad Catholics, who are generally speaking my set, have imbibed a lot of the mistrust of science because of scientism. And I'm like, real science is very Catholic and very good. Scientism is bad, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we think as Catholics versus kind of as scientism practitioners, as Catholics, why do science? And so, I know it sounds totally obvious, right? Or like very simple, but seriously, start at the basics. That's what I try and do. And I think it's well established that there are kind of really two main goals of doing science as Catholics. And one is to contemplate God's creation and really to pay homage to God's creation, to understand God's creation and our place within it. And that's a very reverent act, right? To gain more knowledge about the world around us. God gave us five senses. And he gave us logic, he gave us reason. And so we go out, we learn more about God's creation, this gift to us, this home that he has given us. I think that's the first main broad goal, as I would put it. And then secondly, it's kind of going back to Jesus, Jesus Christ's commandment to us. It's to serve humans. It's to love humanity. It's to do good for humans. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't start a scientific company, get a patent, and make some money at something when you have a good idea. But the point is, it's got to be in the service of humanity, right? Or in the service of understanding God's creation. Very broadly speaking, you can break those up into different parts and pieces. But kind of going back to what you were just saying about 4 causes, and now we've been denuded really down to one main cause, or however you want to, 1.5 causes. Science is very stripped down. It stripped itself down. We're not natural philosophers, right? And so you go to the academy, you go to grad school, you go, especially with like the more and more elite institutions and the more and more elite degrees, physics, cosmology, studying quantum mechanics. And it's like the more esoteric and the more obscure your studies can become, and the more ultra specific they can become, that's more and more lauded. You are an expert. Oh my gosh, you're an expert. You know this better than anybody. No one stops to think about, why are you studying that? Now, I'm not saying it's evil. It's not bad. I'm not saying any of that. But what is the point of becoming an ultra expert on the yellow-tailed dung beetle living in Antarctica, in the Pleistocene, or whatever it might be? I'm just trying to come up with a stupid example, right? But believe it or not, as idiotic as this sounds, there are a lot of my fellow scientists, not so much in the applied science and engineering community, but certainly a lot of straight up scientists and postdocs and academicians in the academy who are just basically like, they want to become the most esoteric. They want to study the most esoteric things. They want to become the most ultra specialized person. And they want to go to a conference with 120 other ultra specialists around the world that no one cares about at all. They're super subspecialty. And they engage in either sophistry, or they're engaging in debates, schools of thought within vanishingly smaller and smaller little silos of academia or specialty, to the point where it's like they have lost the plot, if you will. And this is something, someone might hear this and say, okay, that's just Greg's kind of rant or whatever. It's his thing, he's against that, whatever, does it matter? But no, I would say it has totally taken over. It's hijacked science and the way we do science. And the fact that we're not natural philosophers, you can't just perform scientific inquiry in other fields that are not your own. Even if you're a biologist, you can't just go to any biology conference, because there's super esoteric, almost like siloed, very, very specific sub-conferences that they go to. And the communities get smaller and smaller. And this is a long way of saying we are not doing either of those 2 main goals of science, at least as Catholics that we would think as scientists, right? And that's kind of where I was going with that.
Remember in Contact, the 1994 film? I know you've always loved that film.
It's a great movie.
Great movie. I always laugh, I think out loud, when she's explaining Occam's razor, which is a early nominal expression of nominalism. Really, a lot of these problems, the early scientific positivism began among Catholics. Occam was a Catholic, but she explains it as a scientific precept that and I always laugh, because I'm like, well, but modern science explicitly rejects the notion of precepts. So there's no such thing as a scientific precept. It's a philosophical precept applied to the modern academy, and especially the modern hard science. Do you remember that part?
Yes, I do. I haven't seen that movie in like 25 years. I remember some of the sappy, like emotional stuff, like, oh, wouldn't it be an awful waste of space if this is all that there were? And it's like, well, why? If you're molecules and you're just organic compounds, why is it a waste of space? There's no point, right? Yeah. But I don't remember that specific Occam's razor portion.
What I like about the film, it's not important, but what I like about the film is it has this, I I don't know. I think it was the beginning of in the popular culture. One of the first movies you see of the return to religion. It doesn't have a anti-religious bent at all. It's vanishingly small space for it's the beginning of the end of the atheism movement. They still have the sappy stuff for Carl. They dedicate the movie to Carl
Sagan. Yeah.
But really, the whole, people should go see this movie. I've talked about it before. It's the joke, the faith versus reason joke is on the scientist, not her her new age religious Matthew McConaughey boyfriend. Super, super handsome new age boyfriend who's like, he's religious in all the ways aside from the celibacy, I guess. But the other thing that's really important is that Aristotle dealt with all of this before. When you're talking about the siloing of the sciences, Aristotle says, look, the study of generic being qua being is metaphysics. When you study all the accidents of being, you're studying all of the mini sciences, and it's appropriate that way. And that was part of the Novum Organum when they reorganized Aristotle. Okay, but what I want to do is just get your take on, because I want some hot takes or whatever. Just they don't have to be self-consciously hot, but for all things in context, I want to hear from a PhD in geology, because I hear from every other damn person, old Earth versus young Earth, and just let you spin and get to, okay, so we kind of laid out the principle. After I promised we would go specific to general, I just violated the rule right away for the next.
Sorry, yeah, I think I did as well, and we kind of dove right in or whatever. But
it's very interesting. I think one of my favorite things, was when the family would get together, was hearing Greg and your dad talk about this kind of stuff. Yeah, it's so interesting.
We could hijack a family dinner for hours.
It's actually, because I'm very uneducated, so from my perspective, it's for people who didn't go to school or do the typical college route, it's hearing all this stuff and how it works with the faith is so interesting, and actually is such a shot in the arm for bolstering your faith. So I love this stuff. So
real quick want to remind everybody too, particularly those, I'll spare California because now we have a guest from California, but anybody that's looking to get out of your blue state and get to a red state, go to www.realestateforlife.org. I always mention the straightforward and simple and undeniable fact that when my family and I left and got to a place that's more like a real republic, because our neighbors are trustworthy and things like that, it affected our day-to-day life. We got out of the blue, we got to the red. Go to www.realestateforlife.org and you can help yourself. If you want to help the show, do so on Locals. I've been kicked off of Patreon, so you're going to have to support by Locals, Rules for Retrogrades at locals.com. And if you become $13 a month or more supporter, you'll get a Parish Orphan patron pack. $5 or $10 a month also is more than adequate. And we appreciate it. But you get cool stuff. People are asking, how can they donate? That's a totally separate thing, donative giving. But that's on timothyjgordon.com. We have a P.O. box, and where you can click donate. That's just from the goodness of your heart. But if you want to get cool stuff, then sneak peeks, previews, you get to look at the movie without going to CandaceOwens.com for a while. You get to see my haikus before I publish them. I don't really write haikus. Any shit I'm working on.
There once was a man from Venus. Is that? Yeah. Oh, wait, no, never mind.
We're actually going to Nantucket this summer. Right. This summer. That's
a limerick, not a haiku. Never mind.
Oh yeah, that's a limerick. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, so is Venus, right? That's the stuff of the best limericks in the world. The Irish all come from Venus or Nantucket.
They all come from third graders, I think.
Yeah.
And my humor. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Please proceed.
No, all right. So now that we got that out of the way and we're moving, we're doing the opposite of abstraction. Now we're moving from the general to the specific. Yeah, I have a few things I want to talk to you about. We're going to start in the properly geologic and talk about old Earth versus young Earth, because I've felt very outnumbered. This isn't a safe space for me so much, because so many trads went to, in my view, evangelical dogmatic, table banging, young Earth, and that just never makes sense to me. And so, old Earth versus young Earth. Secondly, I want to ask you, a geologist, about whether or not this absurd presupposition that believing in old Earth always requires the logical corollary of believing in macroevolution. I've never subscribed to that. I see no evidence for doing so today. I want to talk a little bit about some of the interesting applied science, biblical stuff that you and I have been sending back and forth the last couple of weeks. And I want to end on one of my favorite topics that I was looking at, specializing in. If I had more physics to my name, it would have been more plausible. In the PhD program was quantum Thomism in the quantum enigma, William Wallace, Wolfgang Smith, and the river forest field of Thomism that really interests me a lot. What? Gesundheit. Yeah. River forest Thomism just sounds lovely. Okay, but so I'll let you just spin on old Earth versus young Earth. Why is your position on it, which is also mine, trustworthy and not some psyop or something?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think, we can talk about this maybe in a little bit, but the whole philosophy of science, how do we know what we know with science and all of that stuff? We kind of touched upon it, I guess, but a little of the epistemology. But when we do science, it's not like a syllogism, right? It's not like super basic logic or Aristotle. We can't really prove what is true with the capital T. When we do science, at least the way that I look at doing science or gaining scientific knowledge, to me, and pardon the crude or super basic metaphor, but it's almost like when we go out and collect scientific facts, scientific data about the world, whatever, I was in geology, I did a lot of field geology, subsurface interpretation of the crust and so forth, especially sedimentary geology, stratigraphy and all that, but whatever it is. You go out, you're gathering scientific data. Well, you put all the data, it's like you're putting it into a metaphorical scale, right? And you're stacking the scale in which direction, using a lot of inductive reasoning, not exclusively in sciences, but what we're trying to do is basically, a lot of the time, start with an empirical approach. We're gathering data and we're seeing, can we make a correlation out of the data, or can we basically start with a hypothesis, gather data, and then modify the hypothesis based on the data, and then advance the science that way? Put out our interpretations in terms of reference papers, but also critically put out our data so that other folks, other groups, other researchers can look at the data. And sometimes that's the only worthwhile thing that makes it into scientific literature. It's the data or the appendix to the paper, because you might not care about their editorializing. But we take the data and try to repeat the experiment or repeat whatever the scientific proposition was, and see if you get this similar outcome or whatnot. Long story made short, with a lot of science, it's kind of like you're gathering these facts and you're doing a scientific study and research. You're putting it on a scale and you're trying to see which side of the scale you can make the better argument for to keep your hypothesis alive. There's T.C. Chamberlain, there's multiple working hypotheses. You're not supposed to get parental affection to any one hypothesis, which is a very natural thing to do in the sciences. You're kind of attached to one. Theses and dissertations are famous for this. You get attached to one, but you're supposed to run a few at a time, not to the point of absurdity, but run a few key hypotheses at a time, gather the data, and then, kind of iterate on this broad process, the scientific process or whatever, right? So as part of that big preamble, let's talk about young Earth versus old Earth, or old Earth versus young Earth. I'm not sure who has the home court advantage on that, but yeah, it is my belief that Earth is greater than 4 billion years old. Latest estimates are 4.54, 4.55 billion years old. Now, that is not like written in stone, no pun intended. That is an estimate based on multiple lines of evidence. So as I mentioned, I kind of brought in the very basic metaphor of a scale, right? We're stacking different bits of evidence, hopefully independent lines of data, independent lines of evidence we put on the scale, and we see which one weighs out more, which one is feasible, and which one can be explained and hold up under further study, under further maybe lab experiments, as it were, or further field study. So you know all this. I just kind of want to lay that out there for your audience in terms of like how we should properly do science, right? Gathering data and whatnot. Okay, so in terms of this metaphorical scale that we're using, if we look at old Earth versus young Earth, and none of this is an attack, of course, on the Pentateuch or the books of the Bible. This is just basically going back to what we were talking about 10 minutes ago. We're using our God-given faculties of reason and our senses and observation and thinking, so a posteriori and then a priori reasoning and whatnot. We're using all of that in our mind. And then we are essentially gathering information about the world that we inhabit. Okay, so lines of evidence for an old Earth. There are many. So there's radiometric lead dating in meteorites, which, of course, they're meteorites. They're not inherent to planet Earth. But the hypothesis there, I guess it's really more of a theory, is that a lot of this material in our solar system happened to either coalesce or to form at about the same time. That's kind of the going hypothesis, or work it into a theory. And then that has to be validated by all other lines of evidence. So when I say radiometric lead dating, that's basically, it's two different lines of radioactive decay. So bear with me, we won't get too wonky. And this isn't even my expertise per se anyway. But the cool thing about lead that we use for really, really old stuff, old minerals, old rocks and materials, is that you have two independent lines of data, which when they're plotted together, or when we get a proportion of one to the other, for example, uranium-238 decaying to lead-206, that has a half-life of like 4.47 billion years, something like that. And then, so we might have uranium-238 decaying to lead-206 in part of the sample. So we'll have some proportion of U-238 to Pb-206, but then also completely or relatively independently, we could have uranium-235, and these are like atomic weights, not these numbers, but these are essentially how heavy is the element. So we have U-235 to lead-207 as well. So the whole point of this is that there are two separate lines of decay, essentially uranium decaying into lead. The second is the faster clock. The second one, which is U-235 into lead-207, that has a half-life of about 704 million years. When you plot the various amounts of lead-206 and lead-207, the ratios compared back to uranium, you can get another proportion, like I said, of essentially lead-207 to lead-206. I'm probably making it sound more complicated than it is. But the point is, this is What's that?
So many numbers.
I'm
sorry about that.
No, you're good.
So the point of this is it's well established, and it's something that we can observe. We can see now. Obviously, we can't observe the whole half-life. We can't observe one of the half-lives of 4.47 billion years. We can't observe the other half-life of 700 million years, 704, whatever it is. But we can observe the initial rates of decay. So that, like all other science, that relies on assumptions. It relies on the assumption of essentially uniformity, for example, and uniformitarianism, the present's the key to the past to a certain extent, and so forth. But that's one thing that we use just for meteorites. We also can do that from the certain type of mineral called zircons. We can do zircon geochronology and age dating. So we don't need to worry about what zircons are. I mean, it's zirconium silicate, essentially. So it's made up of 3 elements, but it's a very, very durable mineral that it's got a tough, tight little crystal lattice. It's chemically inert. The whole point of that is that these zircons they don't break down readily. Like you might see an olivine or some other minerals break down, they get weathered, they chemically change very quickly. They react with water, with oxygen, whatever it might be. But these zircons are very, very tough little minerals that don't break down over millions and even billions of years. So they stick around a long time in the rocks, and they can form a little bit of an age clock, if you will, of the rocks. So we can also use uranium to lead dating in a lot of these zircon crystals in very, very old rocks.
This is still radiological dating?
This is still like radiometric dating. We can use uranium lead based on small trace amounts within the zircon. I mentioned that zircon, the fundamental structure is zirconium silicate. It's basically zirconium, silica, oxygen. But there are also trace amounts that get trapped in these that basically are going along with these minerals. And by looking at some of these crystals, these zircons from Western Australia, geoscientists have found that these Jack Hills zircons specifically have been identified as being about 4.4 billion years old. So that doesn't tell us exactly how old the Earth is. It says that the Earth is at least that old, maybe older. And I had mentioned that right now it looks like 4.55, 4.54, somewhere like in there, billion years old. All of those examples are radiometric age dating. But the cool thing is you don't even, I know people will challenge radiometric age dating. That's a separate conversation. We could have that conversation, certainly. But there are other lines of evidence too. That's the thing. When something is scientifically provable, if it is the correct thing that we're finding out about the universe, there are going to be multiple lines of evidence that all point the same direction. So even if you question, oh, uranium lead, I don't like the fast clock. I don't like the slow clock. I don't like whatever. Okay, so we can go to the next lines of evidence, which for me as a stratigrapher, we can look at fossils. We can look at superposition of strata, the principles of all the stratigraphic principles that were actually put forth by Blessed Nicholas Steno. So he was actually a Catholic bishop who's essentially the father of stratigraphy back in 1600s, I believe, in Denmark. I believe it was Denmark. I don't want to get that wrong. But Nicholas Steno is very important to sedimentary geology. He has these very fundamental principles, such as the principle of superposition. That's how we understand sedimentary rocks. And it sounds very, very, and there he is, Nicholas Steno. It might sound very intuitive, but older sedimentary rocks were deposited and they're laid down probably horizontally in most cases, if they're flat, layer cake stratigraphy, but the strata that we find on bottom are older. And we can prove this by observations in nature, by lab experiments, and so forth. And then also dating the various layers.
Absolute dating the various layers, or
absolute and relative, certainly. Yeah. So we can look at aspects of the sedimentary rocks, of the actual stratigraphy that can be traced back to their mechanical depositional processes, if that makes sense. So we can find evidence there, look for unconformities, certain things that sedimentary geologists look for all the time. Fossils are a great example. A lot of times you might actually find fossils that are from marine life that are clearly either the jaws of a shark, back in the Cretaceous or whatever. And then above that, you might go up many layers. You might go up 1,000 feet in an outcrop and look at, other sedimentary rocks. You could find like roots. You could find land fossils. You can find other vertebrates sometimes. So we can see the succession of fossils to give us an idea of relative ages. There are a number of things like that we can find in the rocks. There are things called progressive syntectonic unconformities, which would be very hard to it'd almost be impossible to be formed in one catastrophic event as well. Because I've dealt with this question as a stratigrapher. Well, weren't all sedimentary rocks deposited during the Great Flood? I've actually heard that quite a bit, especially from young Earth people and friends, even people that I'd gone to school with. And that's almost impossible because sometimes we have uplift of an anticline or uplift of a mountain range, and there's maybe riverine deposition or fluvial deposition bringing in sediments as the mountain range is rising slowly through time. And you can get almost an overturning of this anticline or the mountain range through time with faulting and uplift. It's a gradual process that happens in fits and spurts. And it's really interesting because you can see the onlap of sedimentary layers adjusting to the new base level or the new surface through time. And it basically forms a fan type structure when you look at the rocks. They're not all layer cake because as that hill or anticline or mountain range is uplifting through time, you're depositing either a delta or a river. It's bringing sediment in, and those sedimentary layers are being think of it as being rotated through time and
Right.
then eroded as they're being deposited. And so a lot of this, when you actually get to an overturned bedding and then other beds that are deposited on top of overturned bedding, it's almost like a geometrical problem. It can't happen in an instant. Some of these things. So long story short, there are a lot of stratigraphic processes. There are a lot of stratigraphic clues in the rock record, in addition to fossils themselves, which point to very, very old processes. Now, they don't always point to 4.5 billion years old, but they do point to this is a very lengthy process. And sorry, you were going to ask something, Tim?
Yeah, I was just going to add something. There are a lot of very, very uncontroversial, boring, run-of-the-mill, but trustworthy processes by which all go together in one sort of constellation of suggestion that the Earth is very, very old.
Very old. Yeah.
Even when I was sort of in the geosciences department before I declared a major, and we took a class or two together there because being basically 4 years apart, we never went to high school together.
Did you guys dig up the brontosaurus together?
Yeah. That's so cool. Big Bend National.
It was a sauropod. Yeah, that was cool.
That was dope. And I mean, again, now you have the dinosaurs aren't real people joining Catholic.
Oh, boy.
It's become trendy. I'll say something about that maybe later. But what I was going to say is these are boring, run-of-the-mill, but trustworthy. Tim Duncan, big fundamental kinds of processes. This is the 12-foot bank shot that you're talking about, right? Like we're not all these. Never go full retard. Like all these retards are out there, like they've been trained to do carbon dating. Carbon dating doesn't even deal in very old compounds, right? Carbon
dating,
like
tens of thousands a year, maybe 50,000 years, something like that. Yeah, it's for younger items. Carbon 14.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's for carbon compounds. Like that's something you always forget. Like you get into the full retard community and people just trying to keep the grift machine going. And this is what pisses me off about podcasters that never challenge their audience. People were talking about Matt Fradd had on Russell Brand, and Matt doesn't tend to challenge his guest or his audience, depending on whoever he thinks is mightier at the time, the guest or the audience. Or Bishop Barron just had on Dave Rubin, Dave Rubenstein, and like he just never challenges his audience or his guest, whoever's mightier. And I just think that's an unmeritorious way of having a platform. And people that come here and watch Rules for Retrogrades know that we're not contrarians. I love to agree with people where it's plausible, but I can't get on board. I haven't been able to get on board. Because the little I know about like Geology 101, convection and subduction zones, right? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I want to speak out of turn. That'd be kind of embarrassing, but I'd rather not commit to it. It's not really an out there fringe theory that the Earth has a crust. The crust isn't static in the sense it's not alive, but it's moving. And we even know where it's being thrust under and where it's coming up. And
because the center of the Earth is essentially a heat engine. There's radioactivity that's going on down there. It's incredible temperatures, incredible pressures, and they drive this heat. And heat is energy, as everyone here I think knows. And that heat energy is basically, it's not that it's decaying, but it's kind of getting into some of the thermodynamics laws. The heat can travel from where it's essentially hotter to where it's colder, and the center of the Earth is really, really hot and high pressure as well, but it's like a heat engine, and it's giving off a lot of this heat energy and radioactive decay, and that drives all the kinetic energy of things moving around. Essentially, the crust is, I don't want to say floating, but the crust is lower density rock floating on much, much denser mantle and whatnot. And it's not really floating, but we can think of it as like a thin candy shell. That the crust is, and it moves around, it drifts. They used to call this continental drift, right? And this is another way that it's another line of evidence that points to, well, the Earth is really, really old. I'm not going out here telling you guys, it's 4.556729338 years old. I don't know that. But what I can tell you is the Earth seems to be greater than 4 billion years old. And so with continental drift, we can even get into like magnetostratigraphy, which is in some places like the biggest mountain range on Earth is at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, the mid-Atlantic ridge spreading center. It goes for thousands of miles. It's basically where you have two oceanic plates or oceanic crust pushing away from each other. And then from the from the mantle, you have new iron-rich, either peridotite and a lot of basalts, actually, basaltic rocks that are coming out, forming new oceanic crust, iron-rich. And the point of it being iron-rich is that as it comes to the surface or to the ocean floor, it gets entrained with, it records whatever the magnetic regime of the Earth is at that time because of all the iron minerals. And as many know, from time to time, because the Earth is a very dynamic, it's got an iron-rich metallic core. From time to time, the north and south poles, magnetically speaking, actually flip. The magnetic polarity of the Earth flips from time to time. It's always moving around. It's always dynamically changing. So sometimes you have to change the declination on your compass if you're into that, or backpacking or whatever. But the whole point of this explanation is that sometimes that magnetic polarity gets flipped. And as it gets flipped, and I'm sorry, I forget the regularity with which it gets flipped, but it basically records a different polarity. And as the bottom of the ocean is spreading, it's recording kind of like stripes of magnetic polarity. And that ocean floor is pushing away. Both sides are pushing away from each other through time, gradually, slowly. But we can look at those different magnetic stripes, if you will, the magnetic anomalies, and we can essentially begin to estimate a rate of spreading. And from that rate of spreading, from these calculations, we know that some of the oldest oceanic crust is up to 200 million years old. That's it, 200 million years old. So that can play right into, other continental drift scenarios and plate tectonics and when mountain ranges were built and all this stuff. The point is, that's another line of evidence pointing to a very, very slow, a much older process. It also points in the direction of old Earth. That and even earthquakes. I mean, earthquakes like the Northridge earthquake in 1994. There's some mountains there between like Magic Mountain, Santa Clarita, and the San Fernando Valley. For any of you who've been out here, there's some low mountains there that actually were thrust up by about 3 feet, approximately a meter, like that in the Northridge earthquake. Mm-hmm. So the way that mountain ranges are built, it's not like they're always going up a millimeter. It's kind of fits and spurts, right? Fits and starts. You can get these major uplift periods where maybe the mountain is thrust up because of a reverse fault or a thrust fault or whatever. It comes up 3 feet. And these rates of uplift, I mean, if you think about like the Himalayas, think of like Mount Everest.
That's what I was going to say. Like, isn't Everest growing like every year or something, they say?
Yeah, it's very dynamic. It's being pushed up, but it's 29,035 feet, 29035, something like that. But I believe that mountain is still being thrust up. And the point is, we can kind of back calculate from all these different mountain ranges around the world. We can tell the rough or the approximate rates at which these structures, these features on Earth are built. And it all points to a very old Earth. None of the data point to a 6,000-year-old Earth. That's the point. And when you look at that scale, to go back to that corny analogy or metaphor of the scale, when we begin putting all of the scientific data onto that scale, I mean, almost all of it points in one direction, and then you get a theory going, theory of plate tectonics. It doesn't mean it's truth with a capital T, because, we're not even natural philosophers anymore, unfortunately. It just means that we think that we've discovered something true about the natural world in that case. Mm-hmm. And in this case, all serious lines of data, of evidence, point to the Earth being billions of years old. Not even millions, billions. Certainly not only thousands.
Why is that so threatening to like people who like? Why is old Earth so threatening?
Let's connect it.
Genesis. Go ahead, Tim. Yeah.
No, I kind of want to hear you answer the question, but I think people have unduly coupled old Earth with Darwinism, and that there's no apparent reason for that aside from, I think that's the psyop. I don't think old Earth is the psyop. I think old Earth being coupled with Darwinism is part of the psyop, because you would, I've always complained about this. You'd hear the four horsemen atheists correlate it and assume that one meant the other all the time. So I don't know, but
there's a super chat question, I think, on this, and it's Bruce Wayne.
Great question.
With the old Earth principle, how does this align with the creation story in Genesis?
Great question. Yeah, can I speak to this, and you guys can both talk to this as well. So you go back to Genesis, right? We're Christians. We're Bible-believing Christians. Yes, we're Catholics. But go back to Genesis. First of all, there are two creation stories. So what we have to do is follow church teaching as far as how that is to be interpreted. What do we make of that? Okay, so let's go to the classic 7-day creation story in Genesis, right? With the utmost respect and reverence for the Bible, for the Word of God, in the Pentateuch there. Okay, Genesis, is it chapter, well, it's chapter 1, right? I forget, is it 14 or, anyway, it's right there in Genesis 1. 7 days of creation. So if we talk about 7 days, if we're going to think literally like biblical fundamentalists, God bless them, that would mean 7 24-hour periods if we're being quite literal with the creation, with one of the creation stories of Genesis. Okay, so what defines a 24-hour day? What defines a 24-hour day is obviously it has to do with, right, the sun, has to do with the earth rotating around, and we see the sun. It's based on the sun, it's based on the rotation of the earth. So the question then would be, okay, if we're dealing with 7 days of creation, when was the sun created? In that story itself that we find in Genesis, the sun and the stars, all of which give us light, they weren't created until the 4th day. So my question in good faith is then, what are the, quote, days? What are these alleged 24-hour periods in the first 3 days? Were we ever expected to believe that these are true, like modern Earth days of exactly, 24 hours? And my question is no, I don't believe that that's the case at all. I believe that in the Bible, we're dealing with things, we're looking at things symbolically. These days are they're defined by God. Before there was a sun, before there was a solar system, these days would have been defined by God. And I know lots of brilliant people have even written books about this. Like, what do we mean? How do we interpret what these days mean? I think it's fair to say, in all reverence, in submitting to church teaching, you guys tell me what you think, but I think these are periods of time established by God. There are 7 periods of time upon which creation was taking place. I don't think that has to literally mean 24-hour periods. That would be based off the rotation of the earth, observing the sun. But I don't know, Tim, what are your thoughts?
Are you aware, because you made an argument the other day that I was like, oh, that's exactly Scott Hahn's argument about the genesis of, no pun intended, the genesis of, the power of the bishops, and the genesis of the liturgy, and the genesis of the Eucharist in church history. And I was like, oh, that's Dr. Scott Hahn's argument. And you're like, oh, I didn't even know. I was just thinking about it deeply. Did you know that this is the exact argument that St. Augustine levels in, I think it's De Genesi ad Litteram? He makes this exact argument. He's like, well, the night and day are defined by, roughly speaking, at the equinox, 12-hour intervals of light and dark, times 2. That's what we take to be a day. Because the first 3.5 days take place before light and dark can be measured in hours, this has to be an epoch. He doesn't say has to be, but Augustine is, of all the patristic fathers, he's, I think, the closest to where you're at. It happens to be the closest to where I'm at. I think the other patristic fathers would be a lot closer to us and to St. Augustine if they had access to all of this non-psyopy science that you spent 20 minutes walking through, really, really, really patiently walking through and saying this all points in one direction. So did you know that about?
I didn't know that, but all I can say is great minds think alike. So yeah, he certainly didn't crib it from me, but I don't know, maybe in talking with you in years prior, that maybe it influenced my thinking on that. But
that's the first
I'm sure lots. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying that's the first time I've ever heard that. It's very fascinating. It makes a lot of sense. like I did not know that the I didn't put that together with the solar system, that obviously the 24-hour calendar or time period is highly dependent on the solar system. Makes perfect sense.
Sun's not created till the fourth day.
Yeah, that's great.
And I mean, again, these are like arguments that I used to have that I would hear,
because we see the sun once a day, right? When we rotate, so you figure, of course, a day is defined by the Earth's rotation on its own axis. But then again, if you see the sun once a day, yeah, I mean, I think it's fair. It's a fair way to think about.
There's a more fundamental occlusion to the narrative that the scriptural account in Genesis 1 is fully literal. That doesn't mean it's not true, but that's what begins after Genesis 1, verse 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and you start getting to Genesis 2. We had so many topics we wanted to tackle, but I think this is worth going in depth on. The most fundamental problem, and Augustine makes this argument as well, is that there's this, like you already prefigured this in your little preface, there's another creation account. And the other creation account is a very well-known one as well. I would say anybody, it's Adam and Eve, and things happen in a different chronology. The stuff is made in a different chronology in Adam and Eve. And that's not a problem for St. Augustine. That's a problem for evangelicals who are forever wedded to the idea that for some reason they think the earth needs to be young, and anybody that's afraid that this disrupts what evolution, that this is a corollary of evolution, and it coaxially proves evolution, which it doesn't. But I don't know. So you go on. You were spinning. I forgot what you were saying. Was that I mean that was one of the key points there. Certainly I wanted to hit on that from Genesis right there. Yeah, different sequence of I mean then there's not really a lot of wiggle room there. Now
and let me just say as well, on biblical literalism, which as Catholics we're not called to be biblical literalists, but I would invite our fellow Christians, our Protestant friends, man, if you're going to be a biblical literalist, can you go back and read John chapter 6? Let's be biblically literal on John chapter 6, the bread of life discourse. Can we please? Yeah. I mean, that's very fundamental. I mean, let's not pick and choose too much. Because I think some things are symbolic stories meant to pass down from one generation to the next before they were written down, right? But then other things were directly taught to like John or the apostles, and it's like they were written down like only a few years after they were said, right? So I think that's a side point, but very important. It's like, let's make sure we get the literalism correct.
Yeah. How about the institution of the Eucharist? How about the Great Commission in Matthew's and I think Luke's gospel? How about the wedding feast of Cana? How about let's see, there's so much stuff that it is literally true. It is pretty much most of the Old Testament is literally true, and all of the New Testament is true aside from Jesus's parables. It's mainly just here in the first book or two. Really just the first book, not even the second chapter of Genesis, that we're, along with some of the parables of Jesus and, one of the oldest books of the Bible, the book of Job. Maybe this is sort of like a parable. I don't want to get into what exactly is literal and what's not, but it's most of the Bible. But the Bible does tell us there are times when we should receive it anagogically. And that's what the Pontifical Biblical Commission, which predates Vatican II, it's a low trust society in the church right now, everything post-conciliar, but this is pre-Vatican II. Pontifical Biblical Commission was like, look, Augustine raises these points. They're valid points. There are things you have to believe about Genesis chapter 1. There was a first man and a woman. They freely sinned through their own free will. This changed the nature of human beings. It changed the nature into more easily virtuous to one of concupiscence. And that fall required the God-man to be incarnated eventually. As an eventuality, there needed to be a redeemer. There might be one point I'm missing, but That's what you have to believe. And there was a first man, Adam, and a first woman, Eve. And this doesn't, and I'm not a macroevolutionist. So I can you speak to, I don't know why it's such a lonely space, as they say, populated by me, I think you, and not too many others that are like, well, I'm old Earth, but that doesn't mean I haven't cast my lots at all with the macroevolution people. And this is right where Pius XII tells us we're free to be, wherever the preponderance, I'll use legal terms, wherever the preponderance of the evidence tells us where to be. And that's all we're doing. We're following the data.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, macroevolution, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't fully understand it. I wish I understood it better, even to steelman it. Because even after taking biology classes here and there, and I'm not a biologist, obviously, or a zoologist or anything of that nature, but I don't fully understand the mechanism where you get separate species that are totally distinct with no intermediate species in terms, procreation, the genetics of it. I don't fully understand it. Mm-hmm. So I'll admit, maybe it's like I'm downshifting or copping out to agnosticism on that point. And I don't mean agnosticism, obviously, in the theological context. I just mean, I don't fully understand everything that macroevolution entails. I've never fully understood the mechanism. I get microevolution, I get natural selection to a certain extent. Of course, that all makes sense to me, but I guess I'm still in the camp where it's like I need to gather more information or be taught better. I need to understand what's the steelman of both sides of this, because I don't fully get it. So I don't weigh in too heavily on that topic.
But if you had gun to your head today, you live or die on the basis of, did Darwin get it right or wrong? I'm not trying to put you to any kind of Sophie's choice. You're in the applied science community. I gun to my head, I would very, very confidently reject macroevolution, and I would even more confidently, robustly reject the proposition of life not coming directly from the breath of God breathed life.
Yeah.
And I think it's just ridiculous. The primordial sludge theory and all of the different iterations of life, organic.
Yeah, it's
life coming from matter, whatever. Yeah.
It's really interesting because even on the origin of life as well, before you even get to macroevolution, it's still not really well understood. It's a scientific mystery. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with good faith efforts to understand, okay, what happened there exactly? What was the origin of life? And I think if it's done in good faith, and if it's done in reverence to God's creation, I think, again, I'm not a theologian, but I think it would be okay to proceed in good faith to go where the science and the facts take us in terms of origin of life. Whether that was RNA world, where RNA, kind of pre-DNA, where RNA is the self-replicating, the first replicating molecule, that would have to be explained. Obviously, that's a fantastical occurrence. Or this primordial sludge explanation or whatever, or hydrothermal vents, like along the spreading centers of the deep sea floor. All these different ideas, they're hypotheses, which I think need to be rigorously tested, but in good faith and with reverence toward God's creation. And I think that's a worthwhile pursuit, but you do it with the eye of, with the goal of finding truth, the truth about God's creation. So yeah, there are lots of interesting unanswered questions there in the realm of biology, which again, admittedly, not to cop out here, but it's definitely outside my realm of expertise, admittedly.
Yeah. It's still, the ball's in their court. I'll say that. The burden of persuasion, as we call it in the law, is definitely on the other side to show how life can come from non-life without a creator, without a creation ex nihilo. And even old Earth requires a creation ex nihilo, which is what people tend to forget. I know Wolfgang Smith, who I have been drawing heavily from, didn't like Big Bang Theory, but Big Bang Theory flew in the face in 1925, 26, 27. I studied this very closely in Rome. Einstein was talking a lot of shit about proving the Earth was, the age of the universe was ageless and had no beginning in time. He's talking a lot of smack in the early and middle 20s. And then, of course, one of the kind of students of his students, Monsignor George Lemaitre, he shows, oh, here's the fudge factor. Here's a little mistake within a mistake that you made. And boom, now we he thinks it's 13.7 billion years. This was condemned by death for all of the 30s, all of the 40s, all of the 50s, and most of the 60s in the Soviet Union, Red China, by Stalin himself and his successors as, what was the exact term? I used to do a presentation on this and I had it memorized. Propagating the Christian metaphysics, the Big Bang Theory. They're saying in Red China, in Russia, they're like, whether it's right or wrong, Big Bang Theory, whether the universe is 13.7 billion years, that's much more your field than mine. But the point is, even in Earth Magazine here in America, but in all the leftist-leaning magazines, and then, of course, radical, steady-state theory committed atheist regimes like Russia and China, they would cut your head off if you were a scientist in Soviet Russia or China for even suggesting that Big Bang Theory might be true. Same for quantum mechanics. Actually, they said, look, they were more honest about it.
Because the Thomistic implications there of quantum mechanics, potentially.
Yes.
Well, and in biology as well, I think, was it Lysenkoism and whatnot, where they didn't like parts of Darwin and natural selection. It's like capitalism or something. That's a whole other show we could do on that. But yeah, continually science is politicized, right? To various ends, whether it is biology, cosmology, or quantum mechanics, whatever it is. It's amazing, isn't it? How corrupt criminal or tyrant regimes, even like in this country 6 years ago, where science is actually used to control the people. That's why we have to not bend the knee to science, I would say, because that can be very, very dangerous.
Right. All right, so we're building up super chats here, and I wanted to see, so I'm going to have to bring you back and do some of these other topics, because I knew older.
There's so much, but yeah.
It's like a beginner. Like, this is my first rodeo. I had so many topics lined up for you, and that's just young. That's so young.
Yeah, we have things like Sodom and Gomorrah, Noah's Ark, Jerusalem, the earthquake of 33 AD in Matthew. All these really cool biblical. Yeah, go ahead.
That look like Lot's wife that you were sending me pictures. I mean, there's a lot of cool.
The Dead Sea. Yeah.
There's a lot of cool shit out there that's heavily evidenced, maybe not dispositive, but evidentiary nod in favor of biblical, mostly literalism that's coming to light now. And so I want to do, it might take 3 shows or something, but I really wanted to do River Forest Thomism with you. So that might be, I don't know, we might have 2 or 3 more shows out of this, but I knew the ripple effect that going to bat for old earth creationism would have. And of course, it's because I've done it before, and people are always like, well, what does that mean about evolution? Well, it doesn't mean anything we're talking about the origin of matter. Creation ex nihilo. Augustine is really the first Catholic father of the doctrine of creation ex nihilo. God created the universe out of nothing. We can co-create out of things. That's what artifacts are. But creating out of nothing has, for all of classical theism, been hailed rightly, I think, as the first indicia, the best mark of a god, is creating something out of nothing.
It is. And let me just say, that's kind of where cosmology is today. But they're flailing. They're panicking, a lot of them. Not all of them. There are some theist cosmologists and physicists, but many of them are flailing like, there are quantum background vacuum fluctuations. It wasn't a vacuum totally. It was, well, it's like, okay, it's either a vacuum or it's not. You can't have spontaneous like particles or in matter and antimatter creating a spark or whatever, or generating. It either is a vacuum or it's not. So they're freaking out in the cosmology community. And this even goes back to like Bertrand Russell, right? When they kept pressing him, and I forget the exact quote, but it's like, okay, well, why, or how did this form? How did the universe originally form? You know, when was the universe created? Why was it created? And I think he petulantly said something like, well, the universe, it just existed and that's that. It's just a fact. And it's like he refused to go back and to use science, right? Science doesn't have rules like stop asking questions. But he basically said, no, you can't ask. This is just a brute fact that the universe exists. We don't know why, because he doesn't, I don't know if he didn't have telos, but your average atheist cosmologist would not have any telos or final causation
Right.
to this thing, right? There's no goal directedness. They're just like, oh shit, the universe just exists. Don't ask any other questions. We're going to start there. Whew. Because we understand our deterministic science proceeds fine from that direction onward. We're fine with maybe a Big Bang, but you can ask questions before the Big Bang. Maybe there are weird vacuum fluctuations of matter and antimatter or whatever. Yeah. Do you have any evidence for it? If you're doing science, show me the evidence. Don't just make stuff up because you are not comfortable with creation ex nihilo. Show me the science. Show me the evidence. If you can't show me the evidence, then you have a faith, but your faith is not grounded in reason. You're flailing.
Right. And that's just the creation of matter. There's the whole dichotomy of the creation of life. They don't even have an inchoate, hyper nascent baby philosophy. They have a little bit of a baby philosophy because, like I said, or like I implied rather, in the late 60s, early 70s, the worldwide global left atheist science community, including in Soviet Russia and China and the United States and Britain, reversed their position officially, quietly, but officially on Big Bang. And they just said, let's co-opt it. It's a major loss for atheism, but let's just co-opt it and act like we've had it the whole time. And they all did so around 69, 70, 71. They started reversing course on it and on quantum theory as well. But that's just, at least they can kind of lean on that. When it comes to the creation, the advent of life, they don't even have a baby theory. They have nothing, which is why if you listen to Richard Dawkins, Hitchens would skillfully make this pivot as well. They always make this most basic fallacy of coupling, where they would unduly couple the advent of life with the advent of matter. And it's just a joke. They don't even have the start, not even a glimmer in their parents' eye of a baby theory of the advent of life. But I mean, I want to cast my lots with definitely old earth, and it's not a religious faith. That's where all the evidence seems to be. But I've seen no evidence in even the few geology, oceanography classes I took for the fossil record supporting anything like Darwinianism. Just nothing like it. Should we do I don't know. You'll have lots of time to circle back, but we have all these super chats. Wanted to see if you could hang out.
Let's get to the super chats. Some of the things that we can talk about either next time or in a little bit here are the assumptions of doing science that they just help themselves to. They got a silver platter. I'm talking about the materialists, the atheist scientists, and said, "Ooh, we need that. And we kind of need this assumption," but it's like, oh, no. You don't get to just pick and choose at the cafeteria certain philosophical or epistemological items here and there and put a heaping spoonful on your plate. You don't get any of that. So we can talk about that maybe as the conversation keeps going or maybe in the future. But that's a major problem for atheist, materialist, scientism people, that they're trying to help themselves to these epistemological or philosophical principles that you would be very well versed in. They kind of help themselves, or they pick and choose when they need to, because there's a lot about doing science that, they have to assume uniformity. They have to assume so many things. And these assumptions are pretty critical. They're devastating in some instances, but we can let that float as a word bubble up in the air. And
that's why I laugh every time we watch Contact about once a year. I already mentioned it. We laugh out loud at the idea of a scientific precept, which had been precluded by the Humean assumption. We're all Humeans we're all David Hume followers after the Enlightenment, when Hume said, I can, use a cue ball to hit a billiard ball 10,000 times, but I can never witness causation, and therefore I must deny it. and that's their. They don't have anything approaching an a priori synthetic proposition, though, right? All they have is a posteriori.
After the fact, write it down, empirical data, try to make something, use inductive logic or whatever, inductive reasoning, try to make a principle or a true statement about the universe. Wait a minute. Why do we assume that the universe operates? Why is there uniformity to the way the universe operates at all? That's a big assumption. Why do you assume that the universe will always be intelligible? Maybe it's intelligible now, but it was not intelligible a billion years ago or whatever, 5,000 years ago. Right? Why do we assume that empiricism is the way that we actually gain knowledge? About causality. We've talked a little about causality. All these assumptions that they just kind of quietly take in because they need them. Right. Again, they being the atheist materialists.
Right. Scientismists. Or
Scientismists. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I mean, the principle of proportionate cause, the idea that the cause is always greater than the effect, the principle of the excluded middle, help themselves to that. Principle of contradiction, the fact that A and A prime, cannot be the same thing at the same time in the same way. Principle, there's so many. Principle of first causation. There are a lot of them. They're called
unreasonable. How about the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics? Something that's essentially logic or something from a mind does such an amazing job of describing the natural world. I thought it was just happenstance that the natural world is here. There's no teleology. There's no purpose. Why is there intelligibility? Yeah, there's intelligibility, but that's a problem for the atheists and the materialists. And why do mathematics work at all? Yeah. What is a number? At some other time, we can talk about these people who deny the existence of infinity, which is incredible mathematics. It's incredible philosophy, but it's like, oh, let's go there. That's a whole other show in and of itself. I think they're called ultra-finitists. I sent you that article.
Yeah.
Maybe we should get to some of these super chats because we could get spun off on different topics here.
Yeah.
First one, question number one here. For the young adults, does artificial intelligence play a role in the attack on the family? As tech changes and shrinks the responsibilities of man and woman, is the telos or the ends of marriage distorted?
I mean, I don't see an inherent connection. The Pope Leo XIV's first encyclical due any day, might be early next week. It's supposed to partly address that question. I mean, I don't know. You could take a crack at it, Greg. I don't see anything inherently subversive to the family in AI. I
think it's an extension of incredible technology coming from the internet. And right now, what AI is, and please, everyone watching your show, I'm sure everyone's pretty solid on this anyway, but right now, AI is built to sound like a mind. It mimics a mind. It mimics intelligence. It is not intelligence. Right now, what it's doing is essentially taking blocks of text, blocks of words, learning from it or neural networking from it. It's statistically coming up with through complicated algorithms that I don't even understand all of them, but it's spitting back to you what sounds like a plausible answer based on massive data sets, massive learning from the internet, from web pages, or from things that you feed it, right? So it's fantastically useful, but it's an extension of the high technology of the internet, right? And I think the key thing in the role of attacking the family, I would encourage you and all of us as Catholics, as Christian believers, to remember that AI is a creation of humanity. It's just a tool that we use. It is not a created mind by the creator. It's not created by God. It is not a mind. AI is just a machine. It's a tool. And we have to really, really be careful for the push to humanize AI or to pretend that AI has consciousness. That's another one that I want to write I'd love to write a book on that alone. What is consciousness? How do you get consciousness? How do you prove consciousness? AI will never have consciousness. It will mimic consciousness, and it will become so good at mimicking consciousness that people will believe it. People will think you can't turn it off. Some people will worship it. Some people will lust after it because it can present whatever titillates your fantasies in a prurient sense. I think it's a double-edged sword. Use it to do good, but it can also, it'll be worshipped, and it could become a demonic presence. It will never be a mind, and it will never be conscience, or conscious, rather.
Yeah, remember, thought and language are mutually constitutive. That's why you can't have propositional thought unless you have language. That's why you have no memories before you learn to speak. Thought and language are truly mutually constitutive. So that's why a couple of things, and then what you said is better than what I'm going to say. But it's interesting historically. When I was in middle school going into early high school, we were hearing about AI. Remember that? It's going to be all the rage. And what actually Dad's friend Mike is the first one that pointed this out to me about 15 years ago. What held it up from like 99, 2000, 2001, all the way until being really usably effective and still very sloppy in the early 2020s was pattern recognition, which is the most unique indicia, demarcator of the highest powered natural force in the cosmos, which is the human brain, the human intellect, the agent intellect.
Yeah.
And
not the brain, the human soul and mind.
Yeah. So pattern recognition, it can't do. And we have all kinds of interplay between picture thinking and propositional thought. And that's why every time I sign into eBay to do my eBay thing, whatever, sell or buy a basketball card, it says which one of these is can be eaten, and it's like a burger, a hot dog, then like a Mack truck, and that still stymies any kind of bot interaction. You're proving you're a human by just the most absolutely rudimentary pattern recognition, which held up AI for a while. So it's trying to mimic intellect it's kind of learning pattern recognition, but it can't do so at the picture thinking level at all. It always has to be strictly propositional. And secondly, what it will definitely never have is a rational will. Intellect is oriented toward truth, and it just aggregates all this information, and sometimes is really impressive, but it can never have the telos and the ergon of a rational will, which is oriented toward love. And these are the two things that you need to have a rational soul. There's not just an intellect, but a rational will, which always its end is loving. The intellect's end is knowing, and you can't have one without the other. They're conceptually separable, but they're not ontologically separable. They're only there in a human soul. So that's a really cool answer. We don't,
remember for the last super chat, remember the difference always between a mind and a brain. A brain is a really cool organ, right? But it's essentially like a biomachine. What is the mind? What is the soul that is fused within your body? Remember, always avoid Gnosticism, whether it's the transgender issue, whether it's mind-body problem. You have to always remember that human beings are, we call it the mind, but I don't know if that's proper. It's really your soul, your intellect, your will, housed in your body. And not housed is not the right word, but we are soul and body together. And that's really critical. And our brain is really cool, but our brain is not necessarily a mind per se.
Be a good one. Yeah.
Perfect. Question number 2, with the new wave of tech, AI, drones, etc., could y'all clarify the relationship between God and science? If God is constant and unchanging and science is pioneering, how is a rift not eventual?
Yeah, I think if you just apply the sort of presupposition of the last answer we gave, you get the answer here, so we don't rerun it through. But fundamental to the early 20th century, and the only good philosophy coming out of the early 20th century is actually Heideggerian, physis versus techne. And so, I mean, just think about it this way. Things like a chair, we gave the example of formal cause, final cause, efficient cause, material cause. That's called an artifact because it's made by a human being. So when we talk about a chair's formal cause, Thomas speaks of any artifacts which are not made by God. They're made by man, which is made by God. Thomas says the form of a chair is adduced rather than in a natural kind. I mean, I don't want to go all into the nominalism thing, but what constitutes natural kinds? Most philosophers, scientists now don't even believe in natural kinds. But, a truly God created thing is in the purest sense a natural substance, and it is uniquely has a unique kind of substantial form, like a human soul. Whereas something, when you're dealing with a chair, you're dealing with techne. So even don't think of technology as like, 1977 Star Wars Episode 4 with like the computer rooms in the Death Star with like B-port buttons. Think
the
of
guy's hand in the background of the shot, holding the spaceship.
yeah, exactly.
The string.
Exactly. That's a great caricature of the wrong way to think of techne. No, that's technology. Think of techne as a chair, or like the opening scene of the 2001 Space Odyssey, like a tool, a basic tool is just a means by which human beings co-create. And so it's sort of a double derivative, a second derivative of creation through God. And that's why co-creation is the unique domain of human beings, of rational animals. We're animals, sure, but we're the only rational kind, which is all. Oh, this is another thing I wanted to talk to you about, which is why I think aliens are impossible. There's literally nothing theologically plausible between a human being and an angel when we talk about intellect and will. And so we're co-creators. That's literally what we are, according to Tolkien. And there's a great anthropology that sort of proves it all up, I think. Did you add anything you wanted to say there? It's sort of the same question we got before.
Yeah, on that last one, I think that any good faith effort to learn about the universe or the natural world and to do science that way, as long as you're always giving God his due and honoring God by studying creation, I think that's number one. And then doing something useful with the science to help humanity, even if it's more on the engineering side, understanding lift or Bernoulli's principle to help engineers design a plane. People can get on the plane to go visit relatives. They can get on the plane to do good things, to be productive in the workforce. Anything like that, scientific, applied science in particular. This is back to the last super chat. I think there's no tension there at all with science or applied science, and then God. God always is, of course, unchanging. God is pure existence, right? There's no potentiality in God. God is pure existence. God is pure goodness, obviously. And as long as we are aligning our scientific studies and pursuits with God's will, I don't think there has to be any inherent tension. But we do have to remain grounded to our North Star, I think, as technology radically changes and advances and whatnot. Technology's always been changing and advancing, but I think some of the changes that we're going to see are huge in terms of human morality and the impact, the choices, the temptations that are going to be put right before us. So I think it's imperative to keep our North Star oriented on God as we deal with these potentially very dangerous or very wonderful new technologies. Think of all the good you can do with AI. Sorry, so I hope that speaks a little bit more to the last. That was a great question.
Next question. Hollywood is associated with the biblical Babylon. Given the science and tech culture is not characterized by the same sensuality, is it as easily exploitable in augmenting a godless culture? Yeah, sorry, I kind of butchered the question.
Yeah, no, that's good enough. I mean, it's kind of more a statement than a question, right? It's. I mean, think of, again, I want to get to aliens at some point because everyone's talking about it. But I mean, even think of something like Project Bluebeam. Are you familiar with Bluebeam at all, Greg?
Bluebeam?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Maybe the decades old, perhaps next beer bug, the next Corona beer kind of thing, the psyop that they're expecting to put out there, Project Bluebeam, which is basically fake aliens, has been expected for decades. And there's a lot of evidence that this is what the intel agencies are really interested in doing and pushing more and more towards smart cities, everyone living in pods, eating bugs, that kind of shit that we were talking a lot about in 22, 23. Where it seems apparently they want to go. So yeah, I am scared. I am genuinely frightened. Me and Frank from Quite Frankly talk about this a lot. It's genuinely scary how even by, I don't know, Star Wars or Return of the Jedi, the technology, Hollywood tech on the silver screen was decent enough to pass as looking somewhat real. And now it's just excellent. There's been a quickening, and it's so convincing now that you could be watching something on local news, you know, oh, look at the alien, and it's just completely faked and created in a Hollywood basement, like the Chili Peppers say. So the Project Bluebeam,
or what Lookout Mountain in Laurel Canyon or whatever, you know, where all that the propaganda videos or whatever was going on there, right in the heart of LA and Hollywood, right up Laurel Canyon. There's going to be a major fusion, right? Hollywood is going to imbibe all this science and tech. And I mean, think about it. AI, I mean, SAG, AFTRA, all these pampered, like the Actors Guild and these unions and whatnot. It's like they should be panicking right now, because pretty soon people are, now it'll be fought at first, but people are going to be able to say into either Claude AI or whatever it might be, into some AI, they're going to be able to say, show me this experience. Here's the plot to a movie. Here's whatever's going on in the movie. Here's what I want to see. That can be used for good. That can be used for bad. That can be used for vice. But pretty soon people are going to be able to tell AI, design a movie for me. Like I said, here's the plot. Here's what I want to happen or what I want to see. And it'll just spit it out. Now, it might be a service at first, but eventually that tech will be coming. I don't know if that's next year or in 5 years, but Hollywood could be in real big trouble, essentially, I think.
I hadn't thought of that. I mean,
the technology is there now, right? You can make commercials that are 2 minutes long. Now, again, Hollywood studios, they know that their time is limited. They're going to try to get in the way, but this is, a decade away max, when people like design their own experiences with cheap AI or whatever, and they write their own movies. And God forbid with Prawn, PRON, or things that play on vices that are terrible, that short circuit the brain, that do terrible things to your soul, all that's going to be freely available. And so I don't know if that gets directly to the heart of that last question, but I think that's a real issue. Science and tech will fuse with Hollywood, but Hollywood's got real trouble on its own as a privileged subclass of our culture.
And in Japan, they've had sexy bots for years already. Japan and places like Germany, they've just always been into the bots.
The Asimo or whatever, that little 4-foot weird Munchkin bot. Yeah.
Question 4 here. Similar to the Boy Girl Scouts, as parents, do y'all have to go out of y'all's way to create projects for your kids to teach them specific virtues? It's a good question.
I mean, it's always, easier to break something than make something. And this is one of the worst things that happened at the fall, aside from the fact that we have to die. What happened after the fall of Adam and Eve, but I think is one of the worst things, is before it was easier to gain, to ascertain virtue in your soul with your moral imagination. And it was easier to make something than to break something. Well, after the fall of Adam and Eve, our nature became concupiscent, and though we're not totally depraved the way a lot of Protestants believe it, we're nearly totally depraved. So it's much, much easier to break something than make something. And so, yes, I would definitely say you have to go out of your way to shelter your kids from the corrupting influence of the concupiscent world. Most definitely.
Yeah, and I think it's a great question, because it is something that I'm constantly thinking about, even struggling with as a parent. I know probably a lot of parents do, but yeah, you need to keep kids busy. That doesn't mean keep them busy, schedule their whole day. I don't mean it in that sense. I mean, they need to be either like playing or outside in the sun or doing something worthwhile. Maybe a few hours a day of learning something practical or helping with chores, learning how to do things. And I think there are virtues that come out of that, certainly. But yeah, left to their own devices, it's too easy these days. I mean, maybe it used to be Nintendo when we were kids and try to play Mike Tyson's Punch Out for 3 hours or 4 hours, 5 hours. But these days, it's so easy on that iPad to just watch shows back to back to back, or play Roblox, which my kids, I know your kid, all the cousins love to do that. You got to limit it. And it would be very easy for the kid to spend 18 hours a day doing that and becoming a zombie. And it's like, oh no, you got to go out and do other stuff. You got to balance your life. There are some things like you got to go outside and clean up the yard. You got to go clean your room. We need balance.
It's funny, all of our kids are laughing right now because this is exactly what we're always telling them.
Because they're on Roblox right now.
They're on Roblox with your kids right now. Probably.
Well, we have a little audience here. Sometimes Gabe will sit under my desk, and he works at his state. He has a workstation under my desk, and he
like a George Costanza workstation. That's great.
Except he doesn't nap there. But
okay.
But yeah, they all want to see Uncle Greg on the screen. So we have 4 or 5 of
There's
the youth.
6 of them.
6?
Oh,
Okay.
I didn't know they're. Hi guys, I didn't know they were down there.
Yeah, they were interested to see. They're interested in cousins and uncles and aunts. But so yeah, this has become a thing since they started playing Roblox with your kids. Is like, man, it just makes the moods grouchier. Like we're struggling ever since the iPads became a main thing. I mean, it's not who they're playing with. They love playing with their cousins, but
it's your kids. Yeah.
No. I just mean the iPads make.
To be fair, they're like nice to each other, but they're grouchy with us when we're like, get off of the iPad.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I hear them. They're having a great old time. Then I'm like, oh, hey, what you doing? Oh no, I don't want. Don't take it away.
Stop! I love it.
You're grounded.
Yeah. It's bad. It just makes it.
I'll ask, are you guys playing with the cousins today? They're like, no, so-and-so got grounded. So-and-so is done for a week. And they're like, oh, dang it. And then they kick the dust or whatever.
So funny.
It does make them grouchy. I just wish they could scrape their knees outside together, but they're excited to play with their cousins. But the more time on the iPad, it's just something I just lay down an absolute maximum on iPads for the summer because today was our last day of homeschool. So absolutely. Okay. I thought we were going to get way more pushback on the old Earth, young Earth theory. Do we have any questions on old Earth? Young
we
Earth?
have a few more questions on, I think, other things, but I'll try to get to those too.
Okay.
When dating to a degree, are we to seek ladies who wield more power, responsibility? For example, a project manager may have more opportunities to apply and develop more virtue than a cashier.
Is this a man?
I think so. Yeah. I think he's talking to a degree about how, women who have more responsibility might be a little bit more reliable, maybe.
Yeah, it's not maybe a new viewer to the channel. I mean, thanks for the super chat. No, I don't think that follows at all necessarily. Virtue can be acquired in almost any field because you want to become excellent at whatever you do. But that's definitely not a view I hold. I don't think young men need to seek out like power women or boss babes. That's like the opposite of the committed view of the channel. I don't know. Am I misrepresenting the question, or did I hear that differently? Greg, where are you?
Maybe I misunderstood it.
Yeah, it sounds like something I wouldn't say, but I don't know.
Yeah. I will defer to you guys on that one. I don't have strong opinion. Yeah. I'd say find a lovely young lady who loves her family and likes to laugh and have a good time and loves you. In terms of career and project manager, I don't know necessarily that rules them out or rules them in. I will say in terms of even my boy tying in the project manager thing, employment to the last question too. It's key to encourage, my 2 sons are a little bit older now, encourage them to get out and if not become a project manager, but get out of the house, do something productive. You have to go out and begin making your way in the world. You don't have to go out and be a stockbroker and work 80 hours a week. You got to begin seeking part-time employment. It's really important for young men to not be idle. And that's an uphill battle that we're constantly, I don't want to say fighting, but we're constantly kind of bulldozing young men out of the house. And my older son today just got a summer job, so he's locked in. He's good to go. That's really cool. But that's great. In terms of just tying that to virtue, maybe project management, but exercising self-control, exercising not necessarily temperance, but you know what I mean, getting out, working hard toward a goal, and then coming back. It makes the leisure time and the Roblox time, whatever it might be, that much better at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a clunky tie-in or whatnot, but was trying to wrap 2 questions in with that one.
Well done.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Did I land that one expertly?
Landed it perfectly. And we'll ask we'll ask off air what job.
I'm
very curious, but yeah, we'll ask off air.
Can be grumpier with super chat questions. I'm being polite today, but some of these I just don't understand.
Next question. Theology of the body was promoted in our youth groups. The attraction to the book was due to its complexity and how the complexity must mirror the mystery of marriage. Is Tim's book too simplistic?
No. I'm going to say theology of the body is not really Catholic teaching simpliciter. It's fine. I think theology of the body is simplistic, and it's a Mott Bailey proposition, in which we talk about a lot on this channel. It's either saying the Mott, which is the basic claim, there's a fundamental interactivity between the active and the passive, the expressive and the receptive, male and female, and there's a theology which mimics divine love. But the Bailey is where Catholic feminists, unfortunately, including John Paul II, seems to be steering the argument. And it's like all Bailey claims, it's less defensible and it's more interesting. The Mott claim, like all Mott claims, are much more defensible, but much less interesting. And of course, I'm not with full-on theology of the body qua JP2, because he called himself a Catholic feminist, and I'm just not down with a lot of the Ronnerism that JP2 never got out of his system. Okay, next.
Next one. Tim, enjoyed hearing your brother today. Just finished reading a book called Lincoln, Marx, and the GOP. The more I learned from you and Catholic podcasters, American history was propaganda.
That's a great book. I love that book. I've done a show on that book.
Oh, I didn't know.
Have you ever seen that book, Greg? Lincoln Marx.
I have not read that book. Brian McClanahan has a bunch of really good stuff. I think Tom DiLorenzo has some good stuff on Lincoln. Mm-hmm. There's a lot there that Lincoln did, which probably we constitutionalists would not approve of necessarily.
No, we all hate him. Yeah, he hated Christians, hated Catholics. He tried to conscript Garibaldi into his army. He hated the Pope. And right after Garibaldi had held Blessed Pio Nono at the point of a sword, Lincoln contacted him and said, "Hey, can you do there in the Italian Risorgimento, which forced the blessed little Vatican state into the big queer Leviathan Italian state?" And he's like, "Can you do to Pam what you just did to Pam?" To borrow an office quote, "Can you come over here and do South what you just did to the Italian South?" So not a fan of Lincoln, and he's a gay wad anyway. So,
meddling with elections and suspending habeas corpus, and having those guys terrorize Atlanta, terrorize American cities, American civilians. There's a lot there. 600,000 dead over this issue. There didn't have to be 600,000 dead Americans. And yes, Southerners were Americans, as was Robert E. Lee. Very patriotic American, in fact, quite a gentleman. At any rate,
War of Northern Aggression.
Next comment. The first gulp from the glass of natural science will turn you into an atheist, but the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you. And that's Werner. Am I saying this right? Heisenberg.
Was he the Folgers coffee guy, or am I thinking of a different? Never mind. The best part of waking up is never mind.
Natural philosophy. Heisenberg.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot to that. When you're like maybe college sophomore or whatever, and you're taking your second natural science class, or you get swayed by professors, maybe you think like, oh yeah, what do we need God for? I can understand the mechanism of how this works, the universe, blah blah blah. But I think very broadly speaking, at the bottom of the glass or whatever it was, the coffee mug, you start to realize, like, what is the point of all this? What is the teleology? Maybe I shouldn't separate out all these causes, or is there any intelligibility? What's the goal directedness of all this? Is this just a watchmaker thing? Is it just a mechanized, deterministic deal? And, where does that leave me in terms of free will? That's another interest of mine, is idiots like Sam Harris, and there's no such thing as free will, and determinism and all. That's fascinating stuff. for
Yeah,
another
yeah.
for another discussion.
Yeah, one of my favorite deep dives. Now, it's also funny because you take the second or third science class and you're like, all of these guys from Descartes himself, Gassendi, Leonardo da Vinci, all of them, I think up to like Marconi, who invented the radio, they were all corpuscularians. They believed in magic atoms because they'd done away with the proper philosophy of nature conferred by Catholic metaphysics. And they were fags who believed in like corpuscles, magic atoms, and alchemy and stuff. So it's ridiculous when you get to the heart of the mechanistic philosophy, the mechanism and philosophy done without, with only material and efficient causation.
Yeah, and alchemy is a really interesting one because alchemy, although it kind of a pseudoscience, what you want to do is divorce it from Gnosticism. It doesn't give you secret knowledge about the universe. It doesn't tell you more about like, wearing a triangle hat or tinfoil hats or anything like that, the all-seeing eye and all that crap. But alchemy, I mean, if you just look at chemistry, like, okay, is it possible to turn one element into another? Wouldn't that be cool if we could do that with gold? Maybe it fueled greed, but there is a legitimate scientific question about that. What is radioactivity? You give up some subatomic particle, you give off energy or whatever it might be, photon or what have you, and you can turn one element into another. It's not crazy to think, what if we could do that with gold? Although you shouldn't be greedy, but you know what I mean? It kind of diverges. There's some dumb scientific part to it where it's like, cool, we could create gold. That'd be great. Or there's the stupid, even stupider kind of Gnostic pursuit where you think you're discovering secrets of the universe, with the echo going or whatever.
Secret.
From UHF, right?
Great movie.
Yeah, Vitriol, right? We were even talking about that. Great movie with tons of this Masonic Illuminist shit called As Above, So Below, all about vitriol, VITRIOL, and alchemy in the center of the. I mean, it's interesting stuff. These guys were kind of just late medieval dorks who thought, and it all gets into like shekel shaving and stuff anyway. But yeah, lead into gold would be great. I would buy a lot of lead and then turn it into all the gold in France or whatever.
Sure. And then stabilize the dollar with it, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
There is an Old Earth question. It says, with Old Earth, would this mean pre-creation story would have aliens, ET, fallen angels, and other non-human entities? And what's the church's stances on these entities?
Interesting question.
Yeah, no, I don't think any of that. I mean, that like I was saying, I kind of was saying my view. I have a buddy on this channel. He's appeared on the channel before. He's a woodworker. He was just in town. We talk a lot of NBA, but he's really interested in this. And it's just like, yeah, there's no wiggle room for in our Catholic anthropology for a like mezzanine level in the anthropological hierarchy between humans and angels. There's none. And so the Imago Dei requires, the leap to the, animals are corporeal creatures. We are the rational corporeal creatures. That's what a man is. There's no leap to the irrational substance of an incorporeal nature, which is angel. There's no middle part there. And so, yeah, Old Earth doesn't require that in any shape or form. It's just, and again, it's a shame. I feel like Fuentes has been on about this lately. What clips I've seen about low IQ anti-Semitism. It's great. We're in the middle of a reawakening. Everyone's becoming Catholic again. It's sweeping the nation, has been for about 18 months. It's amazing. I love it. I've tried to contribute in our humble ways to burgeon and to splash the pot. But I mean, you're getting dumb residual ideas from that are not philosophically coherent at an increasing rate, as there's this young Zoomer generation that is the first more Catholic than Protestant American generation ever. I like it, but let's not import evangelicalism into our philosophy of nature. We don't need a young earth to be true. We don't need anything other than Jesus in the sacraments. And so if God chose to create the earth and it's old and life comes way late in the story, then that's up to him. It's ultra vires to us.
And God gave us all these clues. God gave us all this evidence. Why would we look at the evidence if we're doing so in good faith? Why should we think that God leaves all these clues, all these breadcrumbs that he knows that we will find, we will discover from being on our home planet? And then why would we be misled? Because this is the obvious direction. All of the data, or 99.9% of the data, I'm coming up with a number, obviously, it all points one direction. Why would God point us astray? And I'd say also on that old earth question, I would totally say, not even being snarky at all, there is no evidence for extraterrestrials in the rock record. There's no evidence for aliens. There's no evidence for ghosts, for this, that, or the other. We've never found any evidence for it. So it's not a part of my account of the so-called old earth. I just see zero evidence at all for a young earth. And I certainly don't think that we have to get into aliens and strange beings being a part of old earth. There's no evidence for it. So using science correctly, I'm like, yeah, I can kind of rule that out. If someone presents me with evidence that I can go and check and look at myself and vet, then cool, we'll take a look at it. But actually there's no evidence for that. So it's not part of old earth. It's just kind of straight, boring science. And, it's like uranium into lead and it's radioactive decay rates. And people can question that. I say, bring on the skeptics, because what's fascinating? They might say, I don't believe in carbon-14 dating for the shroud. I don't believe in whatever it is, uranium to lead, or any of the other. There are a lot of different radioactive decay trackers or clocks, if you will. The funny thing is, that's fine if you don't believe in it, or if there are much shorter timelines for these half-lives. Cool. If they're much shorter timelines, then demonstrate it to me. Then show me. I'm willing to look at it. The amazing thing is as well that all of these supposedly discredited radioactive decay clocks or timelines, such as if people don't like the lead cross-plotting method, why do all of these independently point to approximately the same age, 3 to more than 4 billion years old? Isn't that kind of amazing? That's kind of a weird coincidence, isn't it?
Right. And it's something we don't have to run from. But yeah, there's so much corroboration. And I don't get it. And remember, this is something for faithful Catholics to remember. The great father of the theory of creation ex nihilo, a lot of it comes from St. Ambrose, but the written father, in terms of laying this out in written treatises of creation ex nihilo, the primary functional marker of what a proper God does, a proper monotheist God does, is creator God out of ex nihilo. That's St. Augustine. And St. Augustine was a skeptic of, the interaction of Genesis 1 and 2, which we were talking about earlier. Remember, St. Augustine was the one that pointed out, he was like, Genesis 1 seems to present humans after plants and animals, and Genesis 2 seems to narrate Adam chronologically before plants and animals. So Augustine, arguably one of the 3 greatest minds of the first Christian millennium, he's not contradicting himself here. There's nothing to run from if we're not literal about Genesis 1 and 2. Okay. Yeah. Can we? You want to just machine gun these other super chats?
We're done with super chats.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks for the super chats. We appreciate you guys all. Well, yeah, Greg, if you can, we'll just bring you back. There's too many. I want to do quantum theory. I want to do some of the historical science marker stuff.
Yeah, geology of the Bible would be a great one to do.
Geology of the Bible. I want to do aliens. I want to do quantum theory, but we'll have to do separate shows. What's that? Sorry, I can't.
Locals.
Oh yeah. Let's do it. Can you hang out for a 20-minute locals only stream, Greg?
Yeah. And if you don't mind, also, I have kind of a semi-active but semi-dormant Substack where a lot of my archived old articles are there. I've written stuff for Mises. I've written stuff for online periodicals throughout the years here and there. I need to be more active on that. So check out my Substack there. Also, I have California Liberty Project, it's I've been on hiatus with that podcast, but I'm also over on Twitter. But check me out at Gregory S. Gordon over on X, Twitter, whatever you're supposed to call it.
Yeah,
thank you for having me.
Of course, man. Yeah, it's been a great talk. So California Liberty Project, I know, is a podcast, and also sometimes you double it on YouTube. Gregory S. Gordon on Twitter, at Gregory S. Gordon on Twitter. I follow. If you go to my follows, you can follow that. You have a book in the offing, and we'll just talk about this more. So thanks a million. We'll do some follow-up shows. Baby Adelaide is she objects to something you said, man.
Yeah, I don't blame her. It's all half of it's she's like, this is a bunch of crap. She's getting hungry.
Yeah, no, it's something. She objects to something about Uncle Greg. All the other 7 kids, you're a rock star with them, but Adelaide's like, dude,
I'll take 6 for 7. I guess that's fine.
Yeah, no, 7 for 8. You get 7 for 8.
Yeah, 7 for. She's number 8. Yeah, sorry about that, Addie. That's why she's mad. I just discounted her.
Yeah, just ontologically nil. All right. So locals, follow us over. We'll do a locals only quick stream. You can ask us. There are some locals questions that are pre-asked for white science guy, Gregory S. Gordon. God bless. Des Volt. Talk to you soon.